Um, the phone rang, and it was my godmother. And I was excited. I love my godmother. She was calling to check in on me because I was traveling down to Guatemala, which is where I'm from, to visit her. And it was going to be my second solo trip. The first solo trip that I ever took was a Boy Scout camping expedition in where I cut my finger and required 4 stitches. And when my mother heard that I was in the hospital, that her little baby was in the hospital getting stitches, she fainted. So this was a big deal for my family. My godmother too, but she was okay with me going to this foreign country because my godmother was going to be taking care of us. And my godmother was, how do I put this nicely, rich, was insanely rich. Her and her husband, my godfather, owned CVS Gigantes. They owned pharmacies down there. They owned Guatemala's largest pharmacies. And, she was going to watch over us and take care of us. And she was calling just to kind of button all the details up and make sure that we were okay. And while we were on the phone, my godmother mentioned that she was going to take me to this brand new restaurant that had just opened up in Guatemala City, where the meats were the juiciest, the fruit was the freshest, and the decor was to die for. And this freaked out my mother, because to my mother, to our family, we're from humble stock, so our idea of fine dining was just going to Sizzler, So as soon as I hung up the phone, my mother called an emergency family meeting, and she said we had to address a few things before I went down the trip, because my mother wanted to make sure that I impressed the family, The first thing was we needed to take care of the way I dressed. I know now I'm looking pretty sharp, but back then I wasn't this put together. So we had to go take care of the fashion problem. So we went to where every fashionista goes that lives in Alhambra. We went to Mervyn's, right? They didn't have what we wanted, so we had to go to Sears because they had a husky section. And we went and got a suit off the rack from the Louis Anderson collection, and we got that ready to go, right? The second thing that we needed to take care of before I went down on my trip was I needed to have manners, I didn't have any manners, right? So my mother looked around and found there were these cotillion lessons, and I don't know if you guys know what cotillion lessons are. They're basically like they teach you manners and social etiquette, how to ask boys and girls how to dance. And so my mother was like, okay, we're going to have you and your sister take these classes. And then she found out the price. And then she said, okay, your sister's going to take the classes, and you're going to sneak in and try to figure out what they're doing. And I was a quiet kid. I was a fat, invisible child, so I sat in the back of the room, and I just sort of mimicked everything. And eventually, when the cotillion teachers saw me, my mother just said, oh, he's autistic. That's what he does. That's what he does. And so they took pity on me. Just so you got the idea of my mother, just to get a better understanding of my mother, she's also the woman, when I was a child, when we caught her cheating while we were playing Crazy Eights. We didn't have the money for Uno, but when she caught her cheating at Crazy Eights, she said, I had been cheating for a while, and if you guys were smarter, you would have caught me sooner. So that was it. And then there was the biggest problem that we actually had was I do not speak a lick of Spanish. Now, I understand it. I understand it if you insult me in Spanish, because that's what my mom used to do all the time. I got that, but I didn't speak it. I grew up, I was like the first American kid. I was like, I actually scored in the top 2 percentile in English on everything that I did. It was a big moment of pride for my parents until they were horrified that I didn't speak any Spanish. So the house went on lockdown, and all we did was watch Spanish television, right? We saw, telenovelas, we saw Sábado Gigante, and, I started taking dramatic pauses when I spoke. My mother had to put a kibosh on that, figured it was kind of a lost cause because I kept asking when I was going to see if Guatemala was filled with bikini-clad girls and midgets dressed as cowboys and Vikings. But it was time. I flew down there. It was a lovely, lovely trip. No midgets at all in Guatemala. I don't know what the deal is. I didn't see any while I was down there. But we finally came to the night where my godparents were going to take me to the restaurant that had the meats, the juiciest meats, the fruit that was the freshest, and of course the decor that was to die for, right? I got to the house. I went up to the room they had prepared for me to change. And they had a maid, and they asked me if I wanted my suit pressed. I didn't know what that meant, but the maid said I needed it, so I said yes. Pressed my suit, I went down, we waited for the limo. They owned a limo, and we got in the car. And we drove. And I was really nervous this whole time. I was just trying to remember all the notes that we had talked about. I was, trying to talk to my cousins who kept asking me if I knew Pauly Shore. This was the 90s, guys, so everybody assumed that I knew Pauly Shore because I lived in Los Angeles. And so we were talking, and I was getting really nervous, and I was like, I was watching sort of like, us going through these, like, Guatemala and the different neighborhoods, and we're driving, when my godfather rolls down the window and he says, "We're almost here." Well, he says in Spanish, but I don't remember how to say it in Spanish. He says, "We're almost here. Be ready. Be on your best behavior." And we pull up to this plaza, and I look up at the sign, and it says, Sizzler. Fuck. Because Sizzler in Guatemala is like Taco Bell at the end of Demolition Man. It is the finest place in all the fucking land. Right? And you walk in there, and it's beautiful. You know what I mean? And they have a buffet, and it's fucking beautiful. And they're like little Indita girls fucking serving you. It's ridiculous. And it was fine. I mean, I enjoyed it. You know what I mean? Who doesn't love surf and turf, right? And then I got back, and my mother had given me a phone card to call her, to tell her what had happened at this big meal that she had been looking forward to, and talking with all the cousins in LA going, "Well, yeah, we're going to go somewhere fancy." And I call her, and I tell her that we went to fucking Sizzler, and she fainted. That's my story. Thank you.